recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear part of a telephone conversation between a customer and a sales agent. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Now, before we go any further, could you please confirm your full name for me?
Of course, it's Marge Thompson. MargeThompson.
Thank you, Marge. That's great.
The customer's name is Marge Thompson, so you write Marge Thompson in the space provided. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Now, before we go any further, could you please confirm your full name for me?
Of course, it's Marge Thompson. MargeThompson.
Thank you, Marge. That's great. Now, Marge, the next thing I'm going to do is provide you with a booking reference. You should quote this in any further communication you have with us.
OK, just let me get a pen. Go ahead.
Very well. It's 777 000 44 22. That's 777 000 44 22. Got it?
Yes, thank you.
And just to confirm, you want to hire a car for 14 days, is that right?
Exactly.
Right, I can confirm that you'll be issued with a Tea-grey Swordstar.
What's this Tea-grey sword thing?
Oh, my apologies. That's the model of car we've allocated to you for the hire period.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I'm not that well up on car models.
No worries. I'll give it to you again. Mind you, it's 2 words. Tea-grey Swordstar. That's TIGRE
Perfect, got it. And that's going to be at the airport when I get there on the 2nd of July, right?
Right. At 3 p.m, it'll be there waiting for you.
Lovely. Where should I go to collect it? The hire car centre?
No. You're arriving at the South Terminal. The hire car centre is in the North Terminal Blue Car Park. Instead, your car will be waiting in the South Terminal Blue Car Park. That'll save you a long walk.
Oh, even better. And when do I have to have the car back by?
Well, we give you a period of grace, so once it's back by the 17th of July, at or around 6 p.m, there won't be any problem.
Well, as I'm flying back on the 16th, there certainly won't. I'll surely have it back by the return date, otherwise I'll be in big trouble.
Indeed. Now, what type of insurance would you like?
Fully comprehensive, of course.
Naturally, right. We'll put you down for the comprehensive then, but I must inform you that there's an excess of £500. After that, you're covered for everything.
Fine. That's pretty standard these days.
Before listening to the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Now, Marge, how would you like to pay today?
Do you accept cheques?
Unfortunately not. Only a debit or credit card will suffice.
OK. I have my debit card here. No worries.
Excellent. Let me just give you a breakdown of the total cost now. It's £280 for the 14-day vehicle hire, and the insurance is an additional £75. Will you be needing a satellite navigation system?
How much?
£25.
No, thank you. I'll use my own. I have one on my mobile.
What about the roaming charges? That could amount to even more than £25.
Good point. On second thoughts, I'll take the satellite navigation. I also need tyre chains. Is that correct?
Not compulsory at this time of year.
But I may be travelling up to very high altitudes in the Alps.
In that case, perhaps you should hire them too. The change will set you back another £25.
No problem. So that's £405 by my calculation.
We also have to include 12.5% tax, I'm afraid.
Oh, well, if you must.
So in total, that's £455.50. Now, let me just...
That's the end of section 1. You have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You are going to hear an interviewer who is interviewing Alan. He made a great discovery of Mungo National Park. First look at questions 11 to 15. As you listen to the first part of the interview, answer questions 11 to 15.
An event occurred in 1996 over a period of 3 days that attracted considerable attention at the time and led to a new find in Mungo National Park, which is the focal point of the Willandra Lakes World Heritage Area in New South Wales, Australia. I talked to Alan Moore, the organizer of this trip, about his experience. Alan, what was the purpose of your trip?
Well, as you know, I love the outback and lead tours of people wanting to go into more remote parts of the country. However, I thought it was time for me too to have a holiday. So I packed up my family and we went to Mungo National Park.
Why did you choose this location?
It holds a record of Aboriginal life stretching back over 40,000 years. And of course, I wanted my young kids to be amazed by the main feature of the park, the remarkable Walls of China, as they're called, where wind and water erosion have exposed this long history.
I see. What was the weather like?
It was unusual for that time of year. The rain was just one continual downpour after another. We were always soaked to the skin. So we decided to cut our holiday short and only stayed 3 days in the end. However, it was eventful. The obvious problem was to get back to the nearest town, a small place called Burunga. But the dirt roads out there are always impassable after rain, so we settled down for a long, wet wait in the park. We didn't really mind because the scenery was so interesting. However, the kids wandered away without our noticing, and eventually we realized they must be lost. So we used our two-way radio to contact the park rangers and the police, and a helicopter was sent. Luckily, the kids were found within a few hours, but they'd made an important discovery.
Now look at questions 16 to 20. As the talk continues, answer questions 16 to 20.
So, the trip was also eventful for another reason, wasn't it?
Yes. They led us to some ancient Aboriginal art. The kids had taken shelter in a very small, low cave that was difficult to see from the outside. We were lucky to have another family camping in our location. When they heard us calling the kids, they immediately helped us search for them, and as the hours went by, they also provided us with much-needed support and encouragement. We really appreciated their help, and as we were already soaked through after looking for the kids for a couple of hours, they even made sure we had enough dry clothes to wear. The park ranger managed to get through to us to lead the search, and when the helicopter pilot notified us by two-way radio that he'd seen the children but was unable to land nearby, we were able to eventually find them very excited about what was in their little cave.
And what did you think of their cave?
Well, after squeezing in, I must say I was impressed, and managed to take a few photos of it before we left. There were many faint markings and dots on the wall. It was difficult to tell what they represented because they were so small, but people from the museum who have since visited there said the markings were similar to some other findings in the area, and later confirmed they were very old. Although it's now a protected site, The children like to call it their cave and are allowed to visit it when a ranger can go with them.
Thank you, Alan. If you go to Mungo National Park, you can see the entrance to the cave and some of Alan's photos at the ranger's station. Alan continues to lead tour groups in the outback, and if you want further information...
This is the end of Section 2. Now you have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear a tutor and 2 students discussing a business case study. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Right. Jason and Karen, now I asked you to look at the case study for Box Telecom as part of your exam assessment. It's interesting because they're in the middle of problems at the moment, and I want you to track how they deal with them. Let's start with you, Karen. Having read through the case study, can you just summarise what the problems were that Box Telecom had to take on board?
Well, of course, what first came to their attention was that despite a new advertising campaign, they were suffering from falling sales, and this is something that had many causes. On top of that immediate problem, what had also happened over the last 2 years was that although they had invested in an expansion plan, they had to face up to increased competition. And before they had a chance to get to grips with the effects of that, they were stalled by a strike, and it was just when they were thinking about making a colossal investment in new machinery for their plants. So they were really in trouble.
Yes, I think that's fair. And, Jason, now you contacted the company, didn't you? What did the company define as the reasons for these problems?
Well, I think they've hit on the right things. It would be easy to say they had invested too heavily or at the wrong time, but in fact the signs were good, and what they were set back by was high interest rates. At the same time, their longer-term problems, which were affecting their market share, were eventually credited to poor training. And having looked at the details in their last report, I think that's right.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
So, on to the larger issues then. Karen, what do you think the company will do?
Well, obviously they have the choice of accepting the very favourable terms that another company, KMG plc, have given them to buy them out. That would mean creating a new company with a new image. Or they could decide on a bolder move and offer some new shares if they wanted. But I think they're much more cautious than that and expect they will start trying to find individuals who'd be prepared to back them with some of the capital they need.
Well, you mustn't always assume that dramatic problems require dramatic solutions. Sometimes there's a simple fix, such as changing the guy at the top. If they truly are cautious, then I suspect they will seek to shut down some of their shops. But a more ambitious approach, and one which I think would have more chance of success, would be to alter how they're running things, the management layers and the processes. So, in your analysis, try to think of all the options. Jason?
Yes, it's interesting because I found it a really useful company to study. Its problems cross all types of industries, and it's lucky it's so big. A smaller or even medium-sized company would have gone under by now.
Ah, well, in fact, what I want you two to do is to go away when we've finished our discussion today and write a report. We've looked in general at the telecommunications market in the UK over the last few sessions, and I want you to take Box Telecom as an example and suggest some ways in which they might overcome their problems, and outline the reasons why you think as you do. But try and keep it intrinsic to the company rather than dragging in other examples. Is that okay, Karen?
Yes, I think I can do that. Personally, I've got great hopes for it. I think it will recover. That advertising campaign they did was very strong, and they're very innovative with their products. They set new trends. The company's got to recover, don't you think, Jason?
I'm not sure. I think it can, but it's not a foregone conclusion unless they manage to attract the right level of investment. The company definitely needs a boost, and to attract more highly skilled workers if their recovery is to be long-lasting. When I was talking to the marketing manager, he said to me that he thinks the company had got a great management team. But he would say that, wouldn't he? But they are suffering from having to work with outdated production machinery, and that could cost a lot to put right.
Well, personally, I think the stock market is to blame. I think they were expecting too much of the company, and then inevitably it looked bad when it didn't perform. The market should have had more realistic expectations. And I disagree with you about the advertising campaign, Karen. That's where they could do with some innovation to get sales kick-started. Anyway, let's see what you come up with those.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about African penguins. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40. Good morning, everyone. Today's lecture is about a type of adorable animal, the penguin. When you think of penguins, you may picture them surrounded by snow and ice. But not all penguins live where it's cold. African penguins live in the southern tip of Africa. They are usually found within 40 kilometres of the shore and on a number of its surrounding islands. African penguins are also known as jackass penguins because they make donkey-like braying sounds to communicate. African penguins can keep their body temperature at a stable level, but their land habitat can get quite warm, so there are a number of ways for them to stay cool. They limit their daylight movements on breeding sites on land to early mornings and early evenings to avoid too much sun. The pink glands above their eyes can help them cope with the temperate climates. Like other penguins, African penguins spend most of the day feeding in the ocean, which also helps keep them cool. Being a type of small to medium-sized penguin species, African penguins average about 60 centimetres tall and weigh up to 3.6 kilograms. They have a black stripe and a pattern of unique black spots on their chest. Males are larger than females and have larger beaks. Even though they are categorised as birds, African penguins aren't able to fly because of their heavy bones. Their wings are more like flippers that make them particularly suited for life in the water. When they're on land, their flippers and their tails help them keep their balance and walk upright. African penguins begin to breed at the average age of 4. When a male and female pair up, they tend to breed together for the rest of their lives. Most other penguins nest and lay their eggs out in the open, but African penguins have a different approach. They dig holes under bushes out of their own excrement, called guano, so they are sheltered from the sun and predators. The African penguins survive on a diet that is comprised mainly of marine organisms. They feed primarily on fish like sardines, along with the occasional squid and shellfish. But when normal food is in short supply, they eat tree roots as well. The streamlined body of the African penguin allows it to move through the water like a rocket, capable of reaching a speed of around 20 kilometers per hour when hunting for food. The African penguin's smaller size means that it has many predators both in the water and also on dry land. Their natural predators at sea include seals and sharks. The biggest threat to them on land is not just towards the adult penguins. The penguin chicks are sometimes taken by seagulls into the air and dropped from above. The seagulls could thus feed on them. At risk from predators, young penguins are protected for about 40 days after hatching by both parents. They will leave the colony when they are between 3 to 5 months old and will return a few years later. The entire surface of their body is densely covered with feathers, which fall off during the winter. This process is called molting and takes about 3 weeks to complete. During that time, they are unable to forage. Therefore, prior to this, African penguins spend about 5 weeks laying down fat deposits. They generally live between 10 to 15 years. However, many do not reach their full lifespan. Their population has drastically declined. Approximately 120,000 African penguins remain in the wild, and their population has decreased by 90% in the past 60 years. They are considered to be vulnerable and have been listed as being endangered. 2 major factors have contributed to their decline. They are struggling for nesting space due to human disruption and competing for food due to overfishing and pollution. With the limited number of breeding pairs, survivorship becomes difficult for African penguins. This makes them especially vulnerable as environmental conditions change or an outbreak of a disease occurs. For instance, avian malaria has caused 27% of the captive breeding penguins' deaths annually. The more genetic diversity there is within a species, the higher the likelihood that at least some of the individuals will adapt and survive. That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.